I don't actually look at records. If you come into my office for an interview, I assume that you're qualified. Why else would you be there? And this was during the developmental special duty, the DSD phase in the Air Force. And so if everybody was qualified, what's the differentiator? Do I want it to be degrees? Do I want it to be programs led? No. I want the differentiator to be humble, hungry, people smart. I want humble people in my organization. I want hungry people in my organization. I want people smart people in my organization. Nothing else mattered to me. There's a certain baseline level of qualifications. And sometimes it kind of caught me by surprise because like I had one of my instructors who was like, man, I never thought I'd get hired here. I had a DUI. And this was after, I had known him for a year as a member of my cadre. And I was like, you had a DUI? Like in my head, I said that because obviously I should know that. It was in his records. But he still got hired. And what a great testament to his students because he was a spectacular instructor. And now he has a great story because I didn't let his records blind me. It wasn't purely laziness, by the way, that I didn't read their records. It's truly because they're qualified. Why should I read their records? They're all qualified. Records don't paint me a picture of a person. And so I hired based on humble, hungry, and people smart. And is that you can build hunger into people. Not always easy to do. And then we'll talk about humility and people smart. So the first one, when it comes to building hungry people, the first thing is you've got to set challenging goals for them. If somebody is not hungry, you cannot allow them to be complacent. Somebody who's not hungry, someone who has slothfulness or a low work ethic in their DNA, unfortunately, you're going to have to set high goals for them, challenging goals for them. And then you're going to have to hold them ruthlessly accountable. And then on the back end, obviously, there's got to be a lot of reward to that. And the more we communicate that reward on the front end, if we know what motivates them, sometimes we can certainly help and make that more productive. But we've got to set challenging goals. If somebody is not hungry, then we have to communicate to them. Hey, look, I want to see you step it up. I want to see you move forward. And we can't leave it at that. Let's talk about that big goal. We got to encourage a growth mindset. People that don't have high hunger, they also typically don't have a growth mindset. And so we have to push them to develop, and we have to create an environment where development is easy. Right? Humility can be a very tough one. And the nuclear scenario, the worst case scenario, Patrick Lencioni talks about this, is when we let someone in our organization who's very people smart and not very humble. Because this person can wreck your organization. They can wreak havoc behind the scenes. They're very socially sophisticated. And often we don't know what they're doing to get their way and to manipulate others. And then we're left with a big fat mess that we have to clean up. But when somebody's not humble, the number one thing that we can do is first, we can't let that slide. If somebody's arrogant, if somebody brings an ego to the table, if somebody shuts other people down, if somebody comments after everybody comments at staff meeting, if somebody always gets their way and they think it's because they have the best ideas, but it's actually because they're just disagreeable, we have to deal with that arrogance. We can't let it go undiscussed. And we're going to talk next week a little bit more about trust and how we do some of these things. But truly, we can't let it go unaddressed. The degree to which we let it go unaddressed, it will grow like a weed and it will get worse. People will shut down more around them, and that person will continue to take that as a sign because that's what tyrants do. They push and push and push until they get resistance. And if they never get resistance, they take everything. And so that's what we have to do. We have to stop it in its tracks. And to do that, first, we have to have a high degree of trust with them. And if we don't, then we have to be willing to be forceful and disagreeable with accountability and hold them ruthlessly accountable. But we have to model this as a leader. We have to be humble ourselves. And then we have to create a culture where humility is revered above arrogance. And that means that we don't simply celebrate individual wins, which is what we often do, or the occasional team win. But we celebrate things like teamwork. And sometimes we do this by simply calling attention to it. Man, I'm really proud of you guys. Or we make partnerships a focus of our development. Man, this project's really tough. Can you two tackle this for me? Oh man, I really love how you guys are working together. Man, this is the model. The more that we pour sunshine and sunlight and fertilizer and water onto things, the more of it we'll get. So the more that we reward something, the more people will do it. So we got to celebrate teamwork and collaboration and highlight it just as much as we highlight other individual wins. Collaboration needs to reign supreme. It's agile, collaborative teams that win the day, not individual performance. And agile, collaborative performers will outperform single high performers if the culture and if the environment allows them to do so. And when it comes to people, smart people, man, prioritize self-awareness. I can't think of a better way than doing programs like ours, right? 5 voices, 5 gears, the giant toolkit sessions, prioritizing things like that and making the language common on your team Things like that are crucial to developing self-awareness in others. But it's also asking really good questions. And often I have to do this with my children, but it applies equally well to my team. Hey, how do you think they responded to that? How do you think that felt to them? Hey, earlier during the meeting, you said this. What do you think people thought of that? Hey, let me give you a little peek behind the curtain. And I had to do this once with one of my ALS instructors, and it was a very simple conversation. And I just said, hey, have you ever noticed that during meetings you always start with, here's what I do? When people have a problem, it's always, here's what I do. Well, here's what I do. Well, here's what I do. How do you think people receive that? And it didn't take a very long conversation. The very next day, he started saying, hey, have you thought about this? Hey, here's an idea. Hey, could I make a suggestion? And all of a sudden, people were more receptive to his feedback than they were the previous day when it was all, here's what I do, arrogance, arrogance, pride, pride, arrogance, pride. And so we have to teach people interpersonal skills. We can't assume that they're just going to learn them, that they're going to grow into them. We have to teach them. And if we don't know them ourselves, we can't give away that which we don't possess, which is why all of us should be military Sherpa certified coaches. Any leader in your organization, any sub-leader in your organization needs to go through our 4-day, 5-day, 3-day program. If you haven't been through our program, what is going on? What are you waiting for? MilitarySherpa.com. Email me, mark@marktilscher.com. Let's talk about it. Let's get you and your team into the program. It's the first step. All of these things are things that we cover in our program. How do we grow healthy, high-performing people? How do we optimize the human weapon system? It's covered. Let us develop your sub-leaders so that they can do these things on your behalf and you don't have to put your brain power to them. I hope this episode was enjoyable for you. I hope that it opened up some insights. Great book, The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni. I highly, highly recommend it. Talk to you next week. I'm out.